In the heart of the 15th century, there existed a young woman whose voice transcended the bounds of time, history, and belief. Joan of Arc, a peasant-turned-warrior, a visionary whose faith dared to challenge the power of both the French crown and the church. Her story is one of inspiration and tragedy, but above all, it is a tale that speaks to the dangerous intertwining of faith, fear, and authority. How does a figure so beloved for her valor come to be branded a heretic and condemned to flames? This is the story of Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans, and her fateful trial. A trial set against a backdrop of war, political intrigue, and the unyielding grasp of religious orthodoxy. The year is 1429. France is in turmoil, gripped by the 100 Years' War against England. Vast stretches of French soil lie under English dominion, and civil factions within France further deepen the chaos. The people are desperate for a savior, and that savior, improbably, arises in the form of Joan, a teenage girl from the small village of Domremy. Joan claimed to have heard divine voices, visions of saints instructing her to rally the French forces and lead Charles VII, the Dauphin, to his rightful coronation at Reims Cathedral. To her followers, Joan was chosen by God, a living instrument of divine will. But to her enemies, she was a symbol of rebellion, a challenge to authority, and ultimately, an ontological threat in a time steeped in dogmatic belief. Unbelievably, her divine mission seemed to succeed. Donning armor and leading troops into battle, the Maid of Orleans broke the siege of Orleans and secured several critical victories that turned the tide of the war. Her strategic acumen and charismatic presence electrified French forces and demoralized the English. In 1429, she stood beside Charles VII as he was crowned king, fulfilling what she claimed was God's command. But with victory often comes betrayal. By 1430, Joan's meteoric rise made her a target. Captured by Burgundian forces allied with England, she was sold to the English for a considerable sum and delivered to their ecclesiastical court. For her captors, Joan's public execution as a heretic would undermine her saintly image and discredit the French king she had so publicly supported. Now let us step into the courtroom, a dim, foreboding space filled with cloaked clerics and harsh stares. The trial began in early 1431, conducted in Rouen under the auspices of Bishop Pierre Cauchon. The long shadow of clerical power hovered over the proceedings. The room's atmosphere exuded tension, a silent battleground of faith versus fear. Joan was charged with heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing, an audacious act that symbolized her defiance of both gender norms and societal expectations. One might ask, why was cross-dressing, of all things, included in the charges? In medieval Europe, clothing was considered a divinely ordained expression of social and gender order. By wearing men's attire, Joan challenged the sacred framework that defined womanhood and submission. Her defiance during the trial was remarkable. Despite lacking formal education, Joan's responses revealed sharp wit and unflinching confidence in her divine mission. When questioned about whether she was in a state of grace, she retorted boldly, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God keep me there." Such declarations left her interrogators unnerved, but they were determined to find her guilty. The trial was never about truth or justice. It was theater, an orchestrated spectacle meant to instill fear, to reassert ecclesiastical authority over a society teetering on the brink of change. Religious and political leaders sought not merely to destroy Joan, but to make her a cautionary emblem of rebellion against institutional power. Documents from the trial show how the judges manipulated her statements, twisting her words to suit their narrative. The charges of witchcraft were particularly damning. To medieval Christian society, a woman leading armies through divine visions could only be explained in two ways. She was either a saint or a pawn of the devil, and in this trial, holiness was not the script they intended to let play out. By March of 1431, Joan was excommunicated, stripped of any protection the church might have afforded her. but her spirit remained unbroken. In her own words, "I would rather die than renounce the voices that guide me." For Joan, her faith was a beacon, a light that no earthly judgment could extinguish. And yet, for all her convictions, she was mortal. On the morning of May 30th, 1431, Joan was bound to a stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Her head was crowned with a mitre inscribed with the words, "Heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater." As flames engulfed her, witnesses reported that she cried out, "Jesus!" Her death shocked even her executioners, some of whom later confessed to believing in her sanctity. But Joan's story does not end in ashes. In 1456, 25 years after her execution, a posthumous retrial overturned her heresy conviction, declaring her a martyr. The church that had condemned her eventually canonized her as Saint Joan of Arc in 1920, recognizing her not as a heretic, but as a patroness of France and a symbol of unwavering faith. Joan's trial and death epitomized the perilous intersection of faith and fear. To the authorities of her time, she represented a force too potent to leave unchecked. Her voices posed a threat not just to the English crown, but to an entire hierarchical order built on control, conformity, and sanctioned belief. As we reflect on Joan's story today, questions linger. What does it mean to challenge power? How often do we condemn what we do not understand? Joan's courage reveals that even in the face of overwhelming opposition, faith, when deeply held, has the power to inspire, to disrupt, and to endure. History remembers Joan of Arc as both a savior and a martyr. But let us not forget the milieu that shaped her story. The trial of Joan of Arc is not just the tale of a singular woman. It is a mirror to a world grappling with its own contradictions. A world where fear silenced what it could not fathom. And yet, through that silence, her voice still echoes. Every age believes it has transcended such cruelty, and each is mistaken. For the tools change, but human nature remains. To study Joan's trial is to glimpse the fragility of truth in the hands of power and to see the line between faith and fear, a line as thin as smoke curling from a pyre.